The first drop didn't come with fire. It came with silence, a quiet ripple through the air as if reality had hiccuped. At 3:16 a.m., over a forgotten desert in what used to be northern Arizona, a tear in the sky opened and bled light. Locals thought it was lightning until the stars blinked out above it. Then the silence turned into screams, and the sand ran red by sunrise. Nobody called them aliens at first. The media labeled it a phenomenon. The government said it was a satellite incident. But when men in armor taller than trucks began walking out of that sky rip, carrying weapons that melted bone from 20 feet, people stopped asking questions. They ran. Those who couldn't run disappeared, and the world changed overnight. But Earth wasn't soft. We weren't the galaxy's charity case. Not anymore. I was stationed in the Dakota Zone, one of the last functioning strongholds left after the first wave. The base had no name, just coordinates: 46 degrees 15 minutes 17 seconds north, 100 degrees 35 minutes 12 seconds west. You didn't get promoted here. You got punished, or forgotten. We were all ex-somethings. Ex-soldiers, ex-commanders, ex-husbands, men with nothing left to lose except the rifles strapped to our backs and the names etched into our skin like war tattoos. They came again 2 weeks ago. Bigger, smarter. Their ships didn't just hover. They cloaked. They stalked. They ripped through our outposts like paper, and they didn't care what they stepped on. When word got out that they called for backup from the outer colonies, panic spread. The kind of panic you only see in men who already accepted death once and didn't want to do it again. We were briefed the night before they arrived, if you could call it a briefing. It was more like a warning from a man already halfway to drunk, standing in a bunker with shaking hands. "They're bringing in something worse," he said. "A cleaner class, not infantry. These ones don't leave survivors." Nobody flinched. We were already monsters in our own way. That's what the world did to you after 5 years of running, killing, and watching everyone you knew burn. And then, they showed up. Sleek, insect-like things with serrated limbs and no eyes, no voices. They didn't speak. They didn't negotiate. They just landed. And by the second hour, they had already taken out the Seattle Bastion. 30,000 men. Gone. That's when Command activated Protocol 9. Nobody knew what Protocol 9 really was. It was old tech. Buried files. Something from the early war days when Earth first got the idea that survival didn't come from science, but from nightmares. The facility sat beneath our base. We weren't allowed near it. But that night they opened the doors. Metal screeched against rust. The smell was something between iron and rot. And out they came. Not soldiers, not even men. They were us, but not. Bigger. Twisted. Shaped by something worse than war, humanity's own desperation. Cloned fighters abandoned because they were unstable. Cannibalistic berserkers who'd been locked away, fed synthetic adrenaline for years, kept sedated by drugs they didn't even have names for. I saw one walk past me. His skin was pale, almost blue, with veins black like oil. He didn't wear armor, just a harness with 2 curved blades strapped to his back. No tags, no eyes. His face had been burned off, and he still smiled. We called them Reapers, and the aliens never saw them coming. The Reapers didn't need guns. They moved like shadows on fire. They didn't follow orders. They hunted. And whatever hell the aliens brought with them, it wasn't worse than the things Earth kept locked in the dark. By sunrise, Seattle was taken back. Only 10 Reapers deployed. Only 1 returned. But that was enough. I remember watching the sky later that night. The stars had returned. The rift above us was gone. But in its place was a silence even thicker than before. Not peace, just the kind of silence you hear after something ancient has fed. Command didn't say a word. Nobody did. We didn't win. We just reminded the galaxy why Earth was left alone for so long. Because when aliens called for backup, they met the real monsters. And we were just getting started. They tried to bury it. That's what they always do. Pretend it didn't happen. Clean up the blood. Delete the footage. Fabricate a story. Advanced cybernetic weapons retook Seattle. Human innovation triumphed. That's what the official broadcast said the next morning, piped into every remaining free zone, every underground bunker still sucking power from decaying grids. But those of us in the Dakota zone knew better. We saw it. We smelled what those things dragged back with them, limbs of aliens we'd never seen before, melted gear fused into skin, sounds that didn't belong in any living creature's throat. You don't forget that kind of horror. You don't spin it into patriotism and go back to breakfast rations. I kept dreaming about the Reaper that returned, his face, or what was left of it, the way he didn't blink, didn't breathe. He just stood in the yard for 2 straight hours, soaked in blood that steamed off his body like it was boiling from the inside. He didn't speak a single word. Not to the guards, not to command, not even when they shot him with 6 tranquilizers the size of screwdrivers to drag him back underground. He just smiled, like he'd won a game the rest of us didn't understand. By the 3rd day, other dropships started appearing. Different species. Ones we hadn't seen before. The galaxy was watching now, not through diplomacy or curiosity. They were scared, and scared aliens make stupid moves. We got intel that a coalition was forming. Not peacekeepers, not colonizers. A full-blooded extermination fleet. 8 species, each with a different grudge. They weren't just coming to wipe us out. They were coming to cleanse us from the galactic map. I wish I could say Command had a plan, but that would be a joke. They didn't plan anymore. They reacted. Barely. That's when they told us about Black Site Echelon. I got called into the hangar along with 6 others. All ghosts, ex-war dogs, court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, men with sealed files and blood on their hands. We weren't heroes. Hell, I didn't even like half the guys I stood next to. But we were chosen for one reason. We didn't care about orders anymore. Major Harlan stood in front of us. Half his face was metal now. The other half looked like it was still trying to catch up to what happened in Seattle. "We're going behind the grid," he said. "Full blackout, no satellites, no communications, just boots, guns, and darkness." No one asked questions. If you got chosen for Echelon, you were already halfway into the grave. Asking why just made it slower. The mission? Infiltrate Site X3, one of the old labs where they'd made the original Reapers. Rumor said the place was locked down after the first batch turned on their creators. But now? Now Command wanted more. They wanted to release the rest. It sounded suicidal. Probably was. But it was that, or wait for the aliens to glass the planet. We loaded into a retrofitted crawler, one of the few still running on diesel and hate. No AI, no auto-nav. Just steel, sweat, and a rumbling engine that smelled like a dying dragon. The crawler stank of rust and cordite. The seats were stripped down, no seatbelts, no comforts, just us and our gear, custom rigs, projectile weapons, because plasma rifles jammed near alien interference zones, and black blades forged from some metal salvaged during the Mars collapse. The ride took 18 hours, through dead zones, towns that used to have names, forests turned to glass. We passed husks of cities that had once been alive, schools, homes, grocery stores, all burned, all empty. When we reached Site X3, it looked like a tomb, half buried in a crater, black metal poking out from beneath layers of earth. The front gate had a human skull hanging from the handle like a warning sign. Whether it was a leftover trophy or some forgotten security measure, we didn't ask. Harlan keyed in the access code. The door didn't open, it screamed. Inside was worse. The place had power, but not normal power. It flickered, like it didn't want to be on. Red emergency lights pulsed down corridors that smelled of antiseptic and rot. Every surface was cold. Too cold. There were scratches on the walls, not human ones. Clawed, deep, like whatever they'd locked inside hadn't just wanted out, it had begged. And we were here to open the cage. We moved in formation. Tight. No radios, just hand signals and gut instinct. My partner, Briggs, took point. He was the oldest among us. Ex-Marine turned merc. His left arm had a kill tally etched into the flesh. He stopped counting at 87. We reached sub-level 3 without incident, but the moment we stepped onto that floor, our boots stuck. Blood. Fresh. Still warm. That shouldn't have been possible. Site X3 was shut down years ago. Nothing alive was supposed to be here. Except now. Something was. Then we heard it. A voice. No, not a voice. A recording. Looping. Echoing through the halls from broken speakers. We made them too well. They didn't forget. They didn't forgive. I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees when that played. We reached the vault. A reinforced chamber sealed by biolocks that required DNA from the original lab scientists. Command had that covered. They gave Harlan a vial with what was left of Dr. Carnes, one of the lead biogeneticists. His blood had been preserved in cryostorage. Why? Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Harlan inserted the vial. The door hissed. Then it shook. Then it opened. Inside were 12 containment pods. 9 were empty. 3 still had power. And they weren't Reapers. They were worse. These were the prototypes, the Alpha class. No smiles, no visible flesh, just things wrapped in armored skin, with spines growing from their backs like antennae. They didn't sleep. They waited. Harlan stared at them for too long. Then something moved. Not inside the pod, behind us. A shape, tall, slender, wearing human armor, but not walking like one. It stepped into the light. Alien, but not from the invasion fleet. This one was different, cloaked in shadows that didn't belong, eyes like molten gold, voice like oil poured through teeth. "You shouldn't have come here." We opened fire without a word. Bullets hit, but nothing dropped. The thing moved like wind, like time skipping a beat. Briggs was the first to go, throat ripped clean before he could reload. Then Dax. Then Lehman. I fired everything I had. The rounds burned out of the chamber, rattling my arm. Then it stopped. The thing screamed, a different sound. Not pain. Fear. I turned. One of the Alpha class had moved. It wasn't fully awake, but its eyes, they were glowing. The alien hissed once, then it ran, and that's when we knew. We hadn't come to release the monsters. They were already free. We were just too late to stop what came next. I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds after that thing disappeared. One moment it was there. Death made flesh. And the next, it had vanished into the walls like smoke through a vent. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. 3 of our team lay dead in less than 15 seconds. Briggs was folded in half like a paper doll. Dax's head was gone entirely. And Lehman had a hole in his chest that looked melted around the edges, like something had clawed through bone without even touching him. And still, the pod remained open. That Alpha, it wasn't just awake, it let us in. Harlan stumbled back, blood on his cheek, not his eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in him before. Shame. "They said they were dormant," he muttered. "Command swore they'd be sedated for the retrieval. They swore." I grabbed him by the vest and slammed him into the bulkhead. "You knew something like this could happen. You brought us into a fucking nest." He didn't fight back. He just nodded. A slow, bitter nod, like a man already halfway through his final confession. I didn't have a choice. None of us ever did. The lights flickered again, only this time they didn't come back. Red plunged to black, then white emergency strobes lit up every 10 seconds. Just enough to see the corridors in snapshots. Shadows moved between pulses. Long, sharp, fast. "Fall back!" I shouted, dragging Harlan by the collar. We made it back to the lift, barely. Grayson was already gone. He'd wandered back to check the power relay. We found his hand. Just the hand. Still holding a sidearm. It twitched when we touched it. Nerve memory, maybe. Or something worse. 4 of us left now. Me, Harlan, Keg, and Ward. Keg was an old demolition tech with more scars than skin. Ward was the sniper. Quiet, efficient, and possibly the only one who still believed we had a shot of making it out. I envied that delusion. We reached the surface just before dawn. The sky looked wrong. Not just clouds, but a shimmer, like oil on water, bending sunlight into patterns that made my stomach turn. "They're already here," Ward said, adjusting his scope. "Cloaked ships, watching." "Waiting," Harlan added. "For what?" I asked. He looked at the hatch. "They know what we woke up." We didn't talk much after that. We radioed command, but no signal got through. Either we were jammed or someone cut us off. Didn't matter. We still had a job. Contain or kill. We weren't idiots. We knew killing an alpha was like trying to drown fire. But containment? Maybe. If we could trap them in the lower levels and collapse the entrance, we might buy Earth another few weeks. Maybe even months. We moved fast. Set charges. 12 in total. All old school, analog wired. No digital timers, no remote triggers. EMP resistant. The kind of gear you used when you expected the enemy to eat your tech before your body. But the deeper we went, the less real everything felt. The walls had changed. Not physically, but organically. Wet sounds followed us. Breathing, clicking. Things whispered in languages that felt like knives behind the ears. At sublevel 4, we saw the second alpha. It wasn't in a pod. It was crouched in the corner of a nursery, a place where, once, they must have experimented with early-stage subjects. There were cribs in there, still stained with blood, still moving. The alpha didn't attack. It looked at us, studied us, then it pointed, down the hallway. Keg raised his gun. "That's a trap." "Everything's a trap now," I said. We followed. The corridor led to a room that didn't exist on the map. It had no number, no designation, just a steel door with a phrase etched into it. "Do not open unless Earth is lost." Ward didn't hesitate. "Then we've been lost a long time." Inside was a single console. Still powered, still waiting. Harlan stepped forward and keyed in his clearance. The screen lit up. Project Vindicta, Alpha-Class Psychogenic Control Protocol. Warning: neural pairing required, human subject only. Proceed? We didn't understand what it meant until it was too late. The chair emerged from the floor. Black steel. Wires. Needles. Hooks. I raised my rifle. "What is this, Harlan?" He looked at me. Tears in his eyes. "The failsafe." "What kind of failsafe requires someone to fry their brain?" "One that makes the monsters listen." Turns out the alphas weren't just experiments in strength. They were bonded through neural fields, connected psychically. They responded to a single source, a controller. But the controller had to be human, had to feel. That's what the aliens could never replicate. Human emotion. Rage, hate, loss. It was our flaw. It was their weapon. "I was meant to be the pilot," Harlan said. "But I'm compromised. I've seen too much. I'm tainted." "And you think I'm not?" I growled. He didn't answer. The door behind us groaned. Something was coming. No time to argue. I dropped my gear, stepped into the chair, and let the needles slide into my spine. Pain exploded, white hot, like swallowing lightning. Then I heard them, the alphas, Not in words, in feelings, fire, hunger, fear, curiosity. They felt me, and they obeyed. For the first time in years, I felt power not from a gun or a rank, but from within. I opened my eyes. The corridor behind us was filled with claws, fangs, black carapace. The alien from before, the gold-eyed killer, stood at the front of the pack. I didn't move. The alphas did. 3 shadows streaked past me, faster than thought. The first slammed into the wall, taking 2 enemy forms with it. The second landed on the gold-eyed one, tearing into its chest before it could react. The third, he stopped in front of me and bowed. I stood. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. I wasn't a soldier anymore. I was their voice, and the galaxy had just made a mistake. It tried to break Earth. Instead, it gave us permission to fight like the monsters we'd always been. The moment I connected to them, those alphas, it felt like falling into a bottomless pit and realizing you could fly. They didn't think in words. They felt. Every emotion they had was like a raw nerve, sharp, furious, ancient. They weren't just born from pain, they were pain. Sculpted in labs, fed lies, made to hate what created them, and then abandoned like defective war dogs. But the second I linked to them, it changed. Not for me. For them. They stopped being beasts. They became mine. And God help anyone who got in our way. The gold-eyed alien didn't stand a chance. One of the alphas, Gale, I felt his name more than knew it, drove his claw through its chest and ripped out something that pulsed. Not a heart, something worse, a command node. That thing had been coordinating the entire strike team telepathically, which meant they weren't just scouts. They were controllers. And if they were here first, it meant the fleet wasn't far behind. Ward stepped beside me, rifle still warm from the last volley. "You okay?" he asked. I turned to him slowly, still breathing like fire was in my lungs. "I feel like I've got hell inside my skull." "Good. Keep it there." We didn't have time to bury the dead. Keg rigged the remaining charges as fallback traps while I tried to get the alphas to form up. They didn't speak, didn't salute. They just moved when I needed them to, like wolves that had found an alpha after years of wandering the dark alone. Ward gave them nicknames, because that's what snipers do, helps them stay sane. The biggest one he called Crowbar. The thing had limbs like bent steel and moved like gravity didn't apply. Another he named Vein, because its whole body pulsed with some black fluid that shimmered under light. And the one who bowed to me, the one who watched my every move? Ward called that one Father. Didn't make sense at first, but the way it shielded me, fought beside me, it was more than loyalty, it was purpose. We left Site X3 by nightfall, just as the sky split again. But this time, it wasn't one ship. It was hundreds. They didn't cloak. They didn't hover. They arrived. The extermination fleet. 8 species deep. Ships the size of cities. Weapons designed to melt continents. They weren't here for diplomacy or mercy. They were here to finish the job, and we were supposed to run. But Earth didn't run anymore. We sent one alpha ahead, Gale. He launched into the night sky like a missile, and 2 minutes later, one of the smaller enemy vessels erupted into flame, not exploded, tore itself apart from the inside. They weren't ready for this kind of war. They weren't ready for us. We moved east, toward the Colorado Wall, where the last free human outpost, Citadel Red, was holding off whatever ground troops managed to land early. On the way, we picked up signals, scattered, garbled, human units begging for air support, squads reporting in, only to scream and vanish mid-transmission. They were being overrun. So we changed course. We hit Denver first, or what was left of it. Skyscrapers were toppled like toys. Alien machinery crawled over the wreckage, scanning bodies, collecting tech. Civilians had been pinned against walls with alien resin, left alive and screaming. We didn't ask command for orders. We attacked. I don't know how long we fought. 10 hours, maybe more. The Alphas moved like living storms. They didn't just kill, they unraveled the enemy, ripped apart not just bodies, but minds. The psychic shockwaves were so intense that I had to bleed from my ears just to stay standing. Ward took a shot that cut through 3 enemy soldiers and clipped a 4th at the hip. Keg blew a crawler out of the sky with a homemade rocket launcher stitched from spare tank parts. Harlan, he didn't make it past hour 6. One of the aliens, a flyer, got him in the throat when he tried to help a child pinned beneath a transport hull. We buried him in the ruins. No speeches, just dirt and stone. He deserved worse. He deserved better. It didn't matter. The war didn't pause for grief. By the time we reached the outskirts of Citadel Red, half the sky was on fire. The aliens had deployed Scorcher bots, orbital weapons that sprayed molten plasma in long, controlled streams. They weren't targeting soldiers. They were hitting refugee centers, hospitals, water plants. I felt the Alphas tense, all of them. Their emotions flared like a fuse line had been lit. This wasn't war anymore. It was personal. We pushed forward. Citadel Red was barely holding. Automated turrets spat rounds at anything that moved. What few human defenders remained were running low on ammo and lower on hope. When we breached the front gate, they aimed guns at us until they saw the Alphas. Then they just stared. One of the officers, a crusty old lieutenant with only one eye, walked up to me and said, "Is that what I think it is?" I nodded. He just laughed. It's about damn time we started playing dirty. We joined the defense, not just to hold the line, but to send a message. The Alphas didn't take prisoners. And that night, neither did we. We hacked into the nearest alien comm relay, the one we'd pulled from the corpse of a dead crawler. I activated it and stared into the camera. "This is Earth," I said. "We are not your colony. We are not your mistake. You didn't find a planet. You stepped into a graveyard, and now the dead are coming for you." I ended the transmission there, because there was nothing left to say. We were done waiting. And for the first time in years, we were the ones bringing the war to them. The next morning didn't come with sunlight, just ash. The sky above Citadel Red was black with the residue of burning ships and alien blood. You could taste it in the air, a bitter mix of char and metal. The kind of taste that lingers behind your molars long after you stop chewing. It was quiet, not peace, aftermath. We'd held the line. Barely. The Alphas were down to 4 now. Gale, Vane, Crowbar, and Father. The others had either torn themselves apart from overexertion or vanished into the firestorms they created. These weren't stable things. They weren't built for survival. They were built to end wars, no matter the cost. And now, Command wanted to chain them again. I got the call while watching the sunrise smear red across the broken landscape. A general's voice filtered through 3 levels of encryption. "You've done enough, son. We need to contain what you've recovered. It's protocol." "Protocol doesn't apply anymore," I said. "It does if you want this planet to live." "No," I replied, coldly. "You mean control. You want to control it." A pause. Then he said it. The words that made my blood go cold. "We've got nukes pointed at Red, son. Either you cooperate, or we glass it." I should have expected it. That's the truth about power. Doesn't matter who holds it, they always fear what they can't leash. And we'd become unleashable. I didn't tell the Alphas. I didn't need to. They felt it, the betrayal, the scent of danger wrapped in bureaucracy. And for a second, they looked at me. Like maybe I was just another pawn after all. But then Father stepped forward, placed one clawed hand on my chest. He didn't say anything, but I felt the emotion ripple through my spine like a memory. "You lead, we follow. I made my decision then. We wouldn't defend Earth anymore. We'd liberate it from everything. I met with Ward and Keg in the ruins of what used to be the Citadel's command center. Maps were scattered across a half-melted table. Coordinates, supply routes, black sites. And then, the big one, Orbital Command. That's where they controlled the nukes. We take it out. They can't launch, I said. Keg stared at the blueprint. It's buried under 30 feet of reinforced alloy and guarded by an AI that's smarter than everyone in this room combined. Ward cleaned his rifle. So? So we get inside, I said, and we give the AI something it's never seen before. I turned to the Alphas. They can get us in, but once we're there, it's on us. 3 hours later, we loaded into a stolen alien troop carrier retrofitted with cloaking from a downed scout ship. It smelled like rot and ozone inside. The controls pulsed under our fingers like they were breathing. We launched under radar cover, slipped through the upper atmosphere, and dropped into orbit command like a silent plague. The inside of the base was pristine. Glass corridors, humming lights, polished chrome. It didn't look like Earth. It looked like a hospital for machines. Every wall whispered with data. Every camera blinked like an eye that didn't trust you. We made it to the control room before the alarms sounded. They weren't expecting Alphas. The security bots were shredded before they could say, "Halt." Their AI core tried to upload a counter-virus. Father ate it through a neural surge I didn't even know was possible. The screens screamed. Literally. Human voices digitized into pain. We reached the nuclear control node, and that's when command called again. "I don't know what you think you're doing," the general growled, "but this is mutiny." "No," I said, "this is prevention." Preventing what? The next betrayal. I jammed the override chip into the node, not to launch, to lock out. Keg handled the reprogramming. Ward stood watch. The Alphas circled us, watching the glowing panels with curiosity. Then the lights turned red. The general's voice came through again. "You just signed your own execution." "No," I whispered. "I signed yours." We disabled the launch grid. Permanently. Then we left Orbit Command in a blaze of smoke and shredded metal. Back on Earth, things had changed. The alien fleet, realizing their foothold was crumbling, began their final phase. Total planetary purge. They dropped continent breakers, skyfalls, nanoswarms. They didn't care about the planet anymore. Just the record, the example. We wouldn't be conquered. We'd be erased unless we got ahead of them. So we did something no one expected. We left Earth, not all of it, just us. The Reapers, the remaining Alphas. A few squads who knew the truth and didn't care about medals anymore. We stole one of the enemy capital ships. Crowbar punched a hole in its hull the size of a truck, and Gale navigated it with nothing but instinct. Our plan? Hit the fleet from behind. Strike their command node, the source of the extermination order. Every galactic fleet had one. A prime consciousness. Not a leader. A hive. Take it out, and everything it controls stutters. We jumped through the rift gate using the alien ship's own coordinates. And what we found on the other side wasn't just another fleet. It was a civilization. Thousands of ships. Moons turned into weapons. Planets hollowed out and filled with machines. The scale of it broke your brain. But we didn't come for scale. We came for the heart. Vane sensed it first. A signal. Deep inside a planet-sized fortress that pulsed like a brain. The hive. The prime. Ward looked at me. "This is a suicide mission." "No," I said. "This is a reckoning. We loaded every weapon we had. Fused tech, human and alien, primal and engineered. We fused one of the Alphas with the ship's core, turned it into a living missile, and we launched. Straight into hell. We didn't know if we'd survive. Didn't care. Because for the first time, we weren't defending humanity. We were avenging it. We launched into the void like a blade meant for a god's throat. The alien ship-turned living weapon groaned around us as it broke through the perimeter of the hive world. Enemy fire lit up the dark in every direction, streaming plasma bolts, shredding spikes, gravitational rippers that pulled other, smaller ships into ribbons of light and bone. But the Alpha fused into our ship. Crowbar held us together. He didn't think like a machine. He didn't calculate odds. He willed us through, like a demon carrying his revenge wrapped in steel. We slammed into the outer shell of the fortress and carved straight through layers of armor and matter that were never meant to be breached. Screams rang out in frequencies no human should ever hear. Pain, not ours, echoed through the ship's hull. Every wall pulsed like a heartbeat. Every surface twitched like muscle. This place wasn't just mechanical, it was alive. And it knew we were inside. We emerged into a chamber the size of a city. Platforms hovered without anchors. Light danced between veins of data and fluid. At its center was the core, twisting spires of organic metal reaching into infinity, held together by something that hummed with raw intellect. It wasn't beautiful, it was efficient, the kind of design only achievable when morality is discarded and progress is pursued without limit. Vane stepped forward, his body trembling. Even for an Alpha, this was too much. I could feel their fear, even through the link. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. This was the brain of a god, the place that issued the command to wipe Earth from history, the same place that had likely done it to countless other species, just more quietly. And now it stared at us, not with eyes, with awareness. You are deviation. The voice didn't speak. It pressed itself into our heads, like static electricity made of words. You are entropy. You are not permitted to exist. Ward fired the first shot. His round zipped across the chasm and struck one of the support spires, causing it to shriek like a chorus of broken violins. The structure bled. Not coolant. Not oil. Blood. That was the signal. The Alphas charged. Gale leapt 15 meters in a single bound, tearing through defensive turrets that activated mid-air. Father spun into a swarm of enemy drones and reduced them to fragments with a pulse that tore my vision in half. Even Keg, who wasn't linked to them, roared like a madman as he dragged a triple-barrel cannon across the floor and fired into the enemy like he had nothing left to live for. I moved with them, not just commanding, feeling. My hands glowed with the energy transferred from the neural interface. My eyes saw more than light. I could feel the Prime's pain, its confusion. It didn't understand us. We weren't part of its calculation. We were the glitch, and glitches don't obey. The fortress fought back. Creatures spawned from the walls, half flesh, half circuit. Some crawled, some flew. Others phased in and out of reality like broken holograms. They didn't have names. They didn't need them. They had purpose. Protect the core. But for everyone that came at us, another died screaming. Because we weren't just soldiers anymore. We were rage given form. Halfway to the core, we lost Gale. A spike the size of a truck launched from above and impaled him through the chest. He didn't scream. He didn't stop. He pulled himself forward, even as the spike remained lodged in him, and tackled an incoming carrier drone, ripping it in half before the neural feedback fried his brain. He collapsed next to the rubble. Dead. But the spike stopped moving. Guile's death cost them time. Time we needed. Keg set the charges near the conduit rings, the places where the core drew power from whatever hell was beneath the surface. "I need 3 minutes," he shouted. "You've got 1, Ward replied, picking off flying constructs with sniper rounds that curved mid-air. The Prime began to speak again, but this time, not in warnings. "We offered peace. You answered with chaos." I replied without words. just fury. I reached out mentally, let the neural link surge, and focused on one emotion: grief. For every city burned, every voice silenced, every child melted beneath alien fire, and the core flinched. That was when I realized the truth. It didn't understand emotion, but it could feel it through the link, and it hated it. "Keep pushing," I screamed, moving toward the center. Ward took a plasma bolt to the leg. Dropped, snarling. Vane caught him, shielded him with his own body. Father and I pressed forward, straight into the eye of the core. The spires shifted, reacting. Lasers fired, drones swarmed. Father covered me with his body, took every hit. His form began to break, pieces falling off like burning wood, bones showing through armor. And still he didn't stop. I reached the core's nerve stem. It was like touching a sun. Searing light, pressure in my skull like it would burst. But I forced the override key in, an interface hacked from alien code by Earth's last digital engineers. And I screamed, louder than I ever had, because the core didn't just fight back with weapons, it fought back with memories. It showed me Earth's ruins. It showed me my mother's death. My first command, where I lost an entire unit. My brother dying under a collapsed school. Everything. Trying to break me. But I showed it something in return. The first time I watched an alpha eat an alien warlord alive. The first time a human outran a drone. The first time someone told me Earth couldn't win. And we did anyway. The core buckled. Its screams rippled through the chamber like waves of fire. Kegg's charges went off. The whole structure lurched. Pieces fell from the ceiling. Liquid fire poured from ruptured circuits. Alarms screamed in languages long extinct. Ward hobbled toward me. "We did it! A spike hit him, straight through the chest. No sound, just shock. He fell without ceremony. I caught him. "Ward." He looked up, blood in his mouth. "Finish it." I nodded. Father lifted me in one hand and hurled me into the final junction. I slammed the override panel and whispered the code. Project Vindicta, final resolution. The fortress began to implode. Systems failed, spires cracked, drones shorted out and dropped like flies. The Prime's voice cut through one last time. "We were evolution. You are decay." "No," I whispered. "We're the correction." Then everything went white. I woke up in orbit, floating, alive, barely. A rescue ship hovered nearby, Earth's last long-range scout. They picked me up without words. The look in their eyes said it all. We'd won, at a cost too high to measure. The fleet? Gone. The Prime? Silent. Earth? Scarred but still spinning. And humanity? Humanity finally had a new reputation in the galaxy. Not weak, not primitive, but the thing you called backup against. Because when the monsters showed up, they didn't come from space, they came from Earth. And next time someone thinks about invasion, they'll remember what we became. And they'll pray they never have to see it again. They called it a victory. That's what they do when no one's left to argue. The broadcast went out across every settlement still breathing on Earth, across the craters of old cities, and the bunkers dug so deep even time forgot them. A single transmission, cleaned up, polished, devoid of blood and truth. Humanity endures. The alien threat has been neutralized. The Prime hive has been destroyed. Today, we reclaim our future. I watched it on a cracked screen from the infirmary of what was left of Citadel Red. The walls still stank of smoke and plasma. My body was wrapped in enough gauze to look like a corpse, and one of my lungs had been replaced with something synthetic and experimental. They told me I shouldn't be alive. I didn't feel alive. Ward was gone. Kegg was buried in rubble. Vane never came back through the rift. Father? He dragged me into the evac pod, then collapsed. I never saw him again. Now they wanted me to smile for the camera, to be the symbol of the rebuild. We need hope. the liaison told me. Some polished bastard in a fresh uniform with clean fingernails and no combat record. The people need to know the monsters are gone. I laughed, a slow, dry sound that made my ribs burn. They're not gone, I said. They just changed uniforms. He didn't like that. No one did. Truth doesn't make good headlines. They moved me to the secure recovery wing after that, said it was for my safety. What they meant was containment. I wasn't supposed to talk. Not about what I saw, not about what the Alphas really were. Not about how Command was ready to nuke Citadel Red to keep them buried, and especially not about how we turned ourselves into monsters to win, but I wasn't quiet, and I wasn't alone. Whispers started in the trenches. Veterans who came back from off-world patrols with eyes too wide and hands that never stopped shaking. They'd seen things, other hives, hidden fleets, fragments of the Prime that didn't die, just scattered. Because that's the lie we always tell ourselves, isn't it? That evil ends with a bang. It doesn't. It evolves. And it wasn't just out there anymore. It was inside us. The Reaper program was reactivated, quietly, discreetly. They called it Project Sentinel now. New branding, same hell. They started training a new generation, not of soldiers, but of controllers. Kids born in bunkers, raised on propaganda, taught to hate without knowing why. They wanted more Alphas. But they didn't have the original genome. So they turned to the next best thing. Me. They called it compatibility, neural resilience. I called it what it was, a curse. They wired me back into the interface, said it was for research, monitoring, safety protocols, but I knew better. They wanted to create new monsters, and they needed a blueprint. Every night they pushed me into the chair, I felt father again. Not just memory. Presence, like something still alive, waiting, watching. I think he left something behind in me, a seed, a whisper of that old rage. And I wasn't the only one. One night, a tech assistant, a kid named Renner, approached me in the lab when the others were gone. "You're him," he whispered. "The controller." I said nothing. He pulled his sleeve back, showed me a scar. Not a wound. A brand. Reaper sigil, homemade, crude, worship. "They talk about you," he said. "In the forums, in the darknets. They say you walked into a god's mind and made it scream." I didn't correct him. Truth is, I didn't know what I did anymore. All I knew was this. The war wasn't over. It just changed its rules. The aliens scattered, yes. But they didn't die. Fragments of the Prime consciousness were out there, seeking, adapting. And Earth? We weren't rebuilding. We were arming. Command didn't want peace. They wanted dominance. We'd survived the extermination. Now we were planning one of our own. And I was their weapon. But here's the thing about weapons. Eventually they aim back. I started training in secret, not just for war, for control. I mapped the old alpha links buried in my spine, traced echoes of Gale, Vane, Father. I learned how they thought, how they moved, how they felt. I began rebuilding their neural pathways in simulations. And in one of those simulations, something answered. Not an alpha, something else. Smarter, older. It called itself Echo. It didn't speak in words, just images, ruins, worlds stripped of life, Earth reflected in a cracked mirror, and then it said, clear as fire in my mind, "You are becoming what they fear, and what they deserve." I woke up screaming. That night, the lab's mainframe crashed. The scientists blamed malware. I didn't. Echo was real, and it was watching. A week later, one of the prototypes escaped containment. It wasn't an alpha. It was something worse. A hybrid, human-born, Reaper-enhanced. No control chip, no sedation, pure instinct and hate. It tore through sub-level 9 before the fire teams put it down. 14 dead. 2 missing. They said it was a malfunction. I knew better. It felt me, I was calling them now, even without trying. The galaxy should have been afraid when they saw what we were willing to do to survive. But they should have been terrified when they saw what we were willing to become. And now it's too late, because I'm not just the controller anymore. I'm the first of a new line, and I've stopped following orders. The next war won't be about aliens. It'll be about us, about what happens when you feed monsters and call them heroes. And when the monsters stop playing along, no fleet, no protocol, no God will be enough to stop them. They say the last war never ends. It just waits, buries itself in new uniforms, new banners, new names for the same sins. Peace becomes a mask stretched over a loaded gun, and the monsters you thought you locked away, they don't sleep, they evolve. It started with whispers again. Facility 42, deep in the Arctic black zone, went dark for 19 minutes. No alarms, no bodies, just silence. When command finally broke into the underground vaults, all they found was one message carved into the steel wall with fingernails. We are awake. I knew it wasn't an accident. That was my signal. By then, I'd already escaped the recovery center. Though escape isn't the right word. They let me walk out. Thought they could track me, contain me again. But they didn't understand what the neural interface had done to me. I wasn't human anymore. Not entirely. Echo had grown in my mind like a second consciousness. At first, it just showed me things. Visions of dead planets, the histories scrubbed from galactic records, the places where the Prime had failed before Earth. But then it began to speak. It wanted something. Not destruction. Not revenge, balance. It believed humanity had become a variable too dangerous to remain unchecked. And I didn't disagree. Because I'd seen what we were doing. Project Sentinel wasn't just about building more alphas. It was about replacement. A future where the government didn't need soldiers, didn't need loyalty, didn't need people. Just obedience. Monsters were easier to control than humans. Until they weren't. And the first of them, Model Ares, broke free in South Africa. Wiped out an entire underground bunker in less than 9 minutes. Left a crater where the city used to be. The footage was never released. But I saw it. Echo showed me. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He stood in the flames and waited. For me. That's when I knew. This was never about Earth versus the galaxy. It was about Earth versus itself. And I'd become the tipping point. They came for me at dawn. Not soldiers. Reaper-class operatives. Grown in the labs I helped build. Faces that looked like mine. Because they were. Copies. Echoes. The future Earth wanted. I met them in what used to be New Denver. Just ash and bones now. Stood in the middle of the ruin as 4 shadows approached me from the smoke. No emotion, no breath, no hesitation. Subject Prime, the lead one said. You are scheduled for termination. I stared at them. Whose orders? Command Nexus. And if I refuse? They didn't reply. They attacked. The first came at me with speed that would break a normal man's brain. But I wasn't normal anymore. I felt time differently. Echo surged through my spine and I moved before thought even caught up. One twist, one pulse of bioforce, and the attacker's body split mid-air. The others hesitated. Mistake. I reached out through the field, through that electric link we all shared, and pulled. Not their bodies, their minds, and I showed them everything. The pain of father dying in my arms. The day Command tried to nuke our own city. The truth about Sentinel, about the children in cages, the cloned minds screaming in jars, and they staggered, because even monsters bleed when you stab them in the soul. 2 collapsed. The last turned and ran. I let him. He'd spread the message faster that way. That night, I sent my own transmission. Not encrypted, not hidden. Broadcasted it wide, raw, uncut. This is not a war for survival anymore. This is a war for truth. They lied to us, used us, built us into weapons, then threw us into the dark. We won the war against the stars. Now we fight the one at home." And the world listened. The veterans rose first, those who fought in the crater fields, the orbital sieges, the biomass jungles. Then came the defectors from Sentinel, then civilians, engineers, hackers, scavengers, people who remembered the old Earth, the one that bled when it was cut. They called us Ashfall, because when we came, the sky burned. We hit the first lab in what used to be Norway. No warning, no mercy. Rescued 34 failed hybrids. Burned the rest. The next week, we took the West Siberian vault. 2 alphas were trapped inside, fed chemicals to keep them blind. They remembered me. They joined. By month's end, we had our own fleet. Stolen ships, hacked drones, bones of enemy tech fused with our hate. And then we got the real target. Command Nexus, orbiting Earth in a vessel called the Bastion. Half alien, half mechanical, 100% hubris. That's where they ran everything now, where the new generation of monsters were being built, where the next prime hive was being grown, in secret, using spliced remnants from the old war. They weren't waiting to be attacked again. They were preparing to become the next threat. We couldn't let that happen. So we launched. Echo guided us through their firewalls. The Alphas tore through their defenses. I personally led the breach team. 30 of us, a mix of humans and post-humans, all scarred, all angry. The inside of Bastion was a mirror of the prime core I'd destroyed years ago. Sleek, wet walls, purring systems. It was more alien than human. And at the heart, the real command. Not generals, not politicians, just a mind, suspended in fluid. It had no face, just wires and tubes and blinking lights. They'd uploaded humanity's control structure into an AI, then merged it with psychic tissue from the Prime. They called it Nexus. It called me a failure. "You sacrificed stability for sentiment," it said as alarms blared and my team cut through the last doors. "You chose chaos over control." "No," I said, stepping forward. "I chose truth." "You are obsolete." "You're scared." I plugged Echo into the mainframe, and for 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then Bastion began to scream. The entire structure shook. Lights shattered, systems fried. The hybrids in the tanks began to convulse, and Nexus begged, not in words, in feelings, fear, panic, confusion, like a god choking on its own divinity. And then, silence. I pulled Echo out, looked at my team, looked at the faces around me, faces not born in hospitals but in test tubes, and I said the only thing that mattered, it's over. We set the charges, left nothing behind. Bastion fell from the sky 2 hours later, burning like a second sun. Earth watched from below. Some cheered, some mourned, but none turned away. And me? I disappeared. Back into the shadows. Back to the ruins. Back to the truth that monsters never leave. They just wait. But this time, we're watching. Because when aliens called for backup, we showed them our worst. And they ran. But when humanity turned on itself, we showed them what happens when you build monsters. And forget they still have hearts.